Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again. And today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, we are going over our day one decks for Selene. Selene is the final card of the month, dropping in at Series 5. She is a 1-cost, -1 power that reads, on reveal, afflict the lowest power card in each player's hand with -3 power. This was a fairly hyped up combo with Black Widow, who previously would have been able to be played as early as turn 3. However, with the change to Black Widow, that combo did get a little bit worse, though it's still possible to do. Basically, you give your opponent the Widow's Bite, play Selene on the same turn, and you hit them with a -4 power card that they have to play if they want to draw cards for the rest of the game. And though that specific application is a little worse than it was previously, still seems like a decent thing to be doing with this card. Now, in terms of the Spotlight Cash Week, I think this is actually a really good Spotlight Cash Week. So we have Iron Lad making his first return all the way since he was put in at the very start of Spotlight Caches. A lot of people have been waiting for this card. Very powerful, unique card, still Series 5, and is kind of essential to play a lot of different decks. So Iron Lad making this a very big week for a lot of players who don't have him. And Black Knight, a card that was really bad when it came out. A lot of people skipped on it. It got a pretty strong buff not too long ago, and now it's more desirable of a card if you like discard decks. And then Selene. Selene is a bit of a one-trick pony right now. It's going to be hard to play this card outside of junk, in my opinion, so expect a lot of junk decks going around when this drops. But if you're missing a Nihilus and don't plan on picking him up when he is returning to Spotlight Caches in mid-January, I think this is a card you're not really going to be needing very much. That said, I think if you're missing Black Knight and Iron Lad, this is still a good Spotlight week, especially if you plan on trying to get a Nihilus when he comes back to Spotlight Caches in a few weeks. So yeah, I think Lad is the true star of this week. It's the card people have been waiting for forever, and it's really, really hard to replace while being strong in a variety of good decks. So yeah, overall, one of the better Spotlight weeks for this month, in my opinion. With that out of the way, though, let's take a look at our day one decks. Starting it out, we have Moldy Junk. So the idea with this is we are mixing the Ronin hand fill archetype with the Junk board fill archetype. I've actually had a lot of success with a very similar list. We're just making a bit of space for Selene here in it. The general idea is we're trying to fill up our opponent's hand a bit with Master Mold, and then use Maximus for a good body for the cost, or even playing Maximus at the end of the game to help refill our opponent's hand so we still have a big Ronin. Cosmo's been a very relevant piece of interaction, both in being able to protect our big threats like Ronin and Sentry, turn off those negative effects of Maximus, protect Miss Marvel from things like Rogue or Enchantress, or just make it so that if we Annihilus the opponent on turn 5, we have a chance to throw down a Cosmo to prevent the junk being sent back on the final turn. Also especially helpful if we happen to not draw our Annihilus, in that it lets us still play Sentry without having to worry about getting rid of the Void. This deck does go lighter on interaction. We're more proactive and trying to put out stats rather than trying to be reactive, though Spider-Ham has been a nice tech here. It fills into the curve fairly easily, and it gives us some good information in terms of cards we no longer have to play around in that game. One of the reasons I think Selene will be powerful in this deck is not only because it's another thing to pass over with Annihilus, but the Hood and Spider-Ham are pretty natural targets for this card. Even Master Mold is to a lesser extent, because when Selene hits one of these cards, it will be under 0 power, and that makes it a good thing to toss over with Annihilus, while also getting the benefit of reducing power in an opponent's card, and Selene also herself being a card that you can toss over to the opponent. So this deck went from not having a ton of things to toss over to having quite a few different targets. We have some general good stuff cards here like Jeff and Miss Marvel, just for getting some power and flexibility. Ronin, Sentry, and Annihilus act as our main 3 threats. And Mobius is here mainly because this deck has traditionally had a bit of a rough matchup into Loki, so he's there to hate on Loki a bit, as well as any other decks that are trying to make use of cost reduction, of which there are a fair amount of Zabu shells around right now, so he's actually been getting some pretty decent value. Next up, we have an updated take on the Wolf Junk deck. So the Werewolf Annihilus deck was pretty popular. Werewolf got nerfed. Is it still playable? I think it is. We are going to have to lean on Zabu a bit to get as big wolves as we did before. but I do think there's still a decent amount of potential here. You could even put in another bounce card like Falcon if you really want. I think Beast will do, but if you want a bit more consistency there in being able to bounce your threats and have more stuff for the werewolf, you could consider that in the tech spot for Shadow King. But we have the same early game package, Hood, Selene, Spider-Ham, which go well with the junk stuff, Iceman for another cheap on reveal that provides a bit of disruption and is good to pick back up with Beast, Shadow King is our main tech for reducing power of opponents' cards, Zabu to make our wolf, as well as our Shang and our sentry cost a lot less, so hopefully we can get out that wolf on turn 3 like we used to be able to. Goblin's always been a decent card in junk, but it particularly shines with the werewolf as it is an on reveal that clogs up the opponent's board and doesn't fill our side, so we have more space to bounce the wolf around. And then Beast is our main value engine here, rebuying these powerful on reveal effects and letting us play these powerful 1-cost cards for free while spamming the werewolf all across the board. Next up is our only non-junk deck of the bunch. I think Selene really does struggle to find a home outside of junk right now, but if you don't have a Nihilist or if you're really determined to play this card and you don't want to play junk, this is probably the way I'd go with it. So the idea here is Selene can be used to give more negative power to the Hood, and then we play the game in a way where we don't leave the Hood as a card on the final turn of the game by bouncing it with either our Beast or our Falcon. Alternatively, we can buff up Selene and get rid of her negative affliction with Bast, so that's kind of a way we have of offsetting her effect. Even if you're able to just make her a 3-1 with the negative effect, that seems fairly tempo positive and is sure to annoy the opponent. Our other pieces of interaction here are things like Spider-Ham and Iceman. Nico especially good here, not only a very flexible 1-drop that works well in the bounce shell, but her ability to destroy a card and draw 2 is particularly nice with Selene, or perhaps the Hood or whatever card Selene has been making smaller each turn to destroy it, get some value out of it, and not have to worry about that negative power on the board. In terms of our main power output, that's going to be coming through Bishop, Hitmonkey, and Mysterio. These cards get really big really fast, especially Bishop, when we're playing all these cards for very little cost and replaying them multiple times. So yeah, if you really want to play Selene, but junk isn't your jam, I think this is the best chance she has of being viable. Then we have another kind of spicy cook here, and this is the Affliction High Evo package. So still going the junk direction, but this time we are trying to focus on putting negative stats on the opponent's side of the board and getting a payoff for that with our Abomination. We have Selene, Scorpion, Cyclops, Thing, and Man-Thing as a bunch of different ways to get those negative stats on opponents' cards. We do have the Selene Black Widow combo as previously mentioned, Zabu because we have a lot of 4-drops and we really value being able to save on that 1 energy, whether that's to weave in a Selene or a Hood or a Demon, or just so we have a energy floating so we can get our Cyclops activation. Zabu seems really good here. And of course we have a Nihilist to make it so that our opponents are getting all of these negative cards we don't want to keep on our side of the board, and Abomination serves as our main payoff for reducing the power of the opponent's cards. I think it's unlikely that this is going to be the best of the best in terms of good Selene decks, but if you like doing high Evo stuff, particularly the Affliction stuff, this should at the least be very fun. And last but not least, you probably have the most basic but also fairly effective deck of the bunch, and that is just a Hawk junk. So we're merging the Annihilus package with the Darkhawk package, and we're sliding in some tech there as well in Shadow King and Shang-Chi, so we can deal with our opponent's big threats. We can give them rocks and a Widow's Bite, and Selene is obviously good there too, and then we just send them all our junk over or our void and try and close out the game. Even with Blob being popular, I find that the disruption provided by all the rocks and the Widow's Bite makes it pretty hard for the opponent to consistently have it each game, and Man-Thing I think is a really underrated card right now in that if you just manage to play around it correctly, you can really put an insane amount of power in a lane where your opponent has overcommitted with their cheaper cost cards. So this deck really excels at tempo, disruption, and just being able to react to your opponent's threats when necessary. That's going to wrap it up for our day 1 Selene decks. So let me know what you think about this card in the comments below. Are you going to be picking her up? Are you going to be passing on her? Are you going to be opening this week because you want her and some of the other cards or just the other cards? I'd love to hear it. As usual, decks will be linked in the description if you want to grab any of those. That's going to wrap it up for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.